Moonstruck from 1987, starring Nick Cage, of course, and Cher. Olympia Dukakis, directed by Norman Jewison, written by John Patrick Shanley. Quick logline on the movie. Loretta Castorini, a bookkeeper from Brooklyn, New York, finds herself in a difficult situation when she falls for the brother of the man she has agreed to marry. So lately, with our masterpiece picks, what I've been thinking about is that not so much what is the person's best performance, even though, of course, it has to be a great performance, but what captures the essence, And
Hmm.
when I think of them, what do I think of? And I think it all maybe starts here or kind of comes back to is Nicolas Cage in Moonstruck. It is that over the top, unhinged, kind of zany persona that we've been talking about, but also heavily grounded in vulnerability and humanity and something that you're totally drawn into. And I think his performance is so great in it, given what he's doing, but also the way the movie is shaped. Because until you meet Nick Cage, the movie is in a different register. Because we meet Cher and she's essentially going through a depression, really,
Hmm.
where she's just accepted that this is how her life is going to be, and it's almost like it's like a fable of sorts where the moon and the moonlight is sort of playing on all these different people, and the true manifestation of all of that is in Nick Cage as the wolf who finally comes out, when the moon is really up there, and sort of takes the movie and Cher by storm. And it's an unlikely pairing, especially in the movie's context, that you wouldn't think of, but it all comes together. And that's why I put this as a masterpiece, because I just think I haven't seen such a clear distilled version of that persona of his that we've been talking about, and the way it's sort of showcased in this movie, where you just can't take your eyes off of him. And again, he has disheveled hair,
Hmm.
teeth are in bad condition, uh, but there is something very attractive and appealing about him. And as I was saying, that same energy gets pulled in different directions. I think this is where, in my mind, that energy is sort of sculpted perfectly, where it's, yeah, it hits all those notes while being zany and out there and over the top. So that's why this is my masterpiece. What did you think of Nick Cage in this movie? And I'm assuming you'd seen this movie before.
Yeah, this is only the second time I've seen it. I saw this
Yeah.
movie for the first time about 4 years ago, so it's been recent
Mm.
that I came across it. So in terms of the Nick Cage stuff, I definitely agree with you that the movie changes the tone when he comes in, not necessarily because of him only. The movie becomes more of a heightened farce
Yeah.
on when the plot of the movie being like the moon controlling different aspects of love and turning you into this different creature or person or have all these passions because the moon is big and out. So when the moon comes in to the movie, it starts affecting all the entire movie actually becomes a little more heightened, not as
Mm-hmm.
grounded. It starts off as like, okay, this is a nice little drama or something,
Mm-hmm.
nice light romantic drama slash comedy. Then it turns into more of a farce, and Nick Cage comes in right at that time to dial that movie up to that register and fits in that register and sort of carries then the movie through that more heightened farcical tone through the rest of the film. And I do think this is his part of his career too, where he was trying to say like, could I be like a heartthrob, but in my own way, where he's
Right.
not like a typical guy who sweeps someone off his feet. He's weird, like you said. He's a
Mm-hmm.
weird energy. He only has one hand. Like he
Oh
he
yeah, I
doesn't.
forgot about
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
he only has one hand, and he does act very strange throughout the film. But you understand a little bit of like the attraction piece of it. I do have some issues with the movie that I'll get into like later on, especially with the chemistry part of it. But you see that he can transcend the oddities of this character who's kind of mean and very off-putting and very angry at all the situation that his life is in, and only has one hand. It's not like a James Dean type where he's like, oh, this cool guy who's just like really hot and walks in and then sweeps someone off his feet. No, he's a little off, and that is Nick Cage. He's not
Yep.
giving you what you think he would normally give you. This role wouldn't really work with a quote unquote normal performance. You need the Nick Cage-ness to have this work.
Yeah,
But I
totally.
definitely get why this your point around this being where it kind of started. because earlier on he was playing more straight up, sort of
Mm-hmm.
more traditional, like Peggy Sue Got Married and his early works, also other films with his uncle
Mm-hmm.
Francis Ford Coppola. He was trying to kind of tap in more like that James Dean type of just cool, confident kind of attitude. And this movie is definitely not that at all.
Yeah. It sort of sets them on a different path. And there's something about that, right? Like when people do this and they have this in their careers where they're set up on a different path, it's almost like when that happens, it's kind of the purest form of it because
Mhm.
it's not so self-aware yet. And there's something fresh about it. And I think that's why it feels really appealing to me. Because I obviously watched this movie, way after it was released.
Mhm.
So it was kind of fun to go back and say, oh, this is where it started. And it could be this fresh and pure, like I said. But the movie, on in many ways shouldn't work. Like it's sort of a soap opera kind of movie, but there's something about the world that Norman Jewison is able to build in a very intimate way that feels farcical, fantastical. There's a bit of a magic to this movie, I think. And a lot of it has to do with him, but every single performer in the movie, their archetypes, obviously. And then, of course, Cher, which, she wins the best actress for this movie. And I think that's very deserved, especially at that time where I don't think anybody has seen Cher like this. It
Mhm.
feels like the transformations of all transformations. Normally, people transform to go bigger. This
Right.
is
Right.
a different kind of, I mean, how do you make Cher look dowdy and serious and depressed? Those things are not something you associate with her. And I think she's great in the movie. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about the chemistry part. I think it really works. And you need that jolt, and she needs that jolt. I don't know if this marriage or this relationship actually lives. I don't, probably doesn't, and that's maybe the other thing about the moon, that it probably wouldn't. But at this time, in this moment in her life and his life, I think these two had to come together. Olympia Dukakis even says that, oh, do you love him? She's like, a lot. She's like, oh gosh, that's a
Right.
bad thing.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the seems to be the message of the movie bit. So
Yeah.
yeah. For me, like I saw this, like I said, about 4 years ago, just as like, okay, I should see Moonstruck, and I
Mm.
really didn't like it at all. Actually, when I first
Oh,
saw, it, I was like, this movie is not good. It doesn't work at all. The gender dynamics in it really bothered me. And the
yeah.
tone mismatch really bothered me too, of like, is it a comedy? But then they deal with these really serious issues with her father having this affair, which is treated very
Right.
seriously and kind of like dropped in this weird way. And I definitely was like, this movie is, I didn't like it. And now this is the second time I've seen it. And actually I've changed a little bit in the last couple years too, in the sense of I've been moonstruck myself, in that I now believe in the moon having power over people and emotions. So that part that I thought was kind of dumb and sort of silly and superstitious, I now believe is real. So that is one change in coming to this movie. That part of it, at least, I was like, yeah, of course. Like the moon controls the tides, so why wouldn't it control we're 95% water or whatever that is, right? So of course it would control human emotion. So that part of it works better for me. But the two things that still didn't really work on the second rewatch was, the first one piece of it is that initial meeting between Nick Cage and Cher, where he basically, I don't want to say like forces himself on her, but they instantly just sort of all of a sudden start kissing, both of them, and then they like sleep together, and it's like boom. And I
Yeah.
didn't feel any kind of like romantic tension or tension at all build up between these two characters. Like I just didn't buy that their relationship when you have to in the outset, because it starts with them basically consummating their relationship and then going through the process of dating and getting to know each other, and then that's at the end of the movie. Obviously, they decide to get married and they do fall in love. But I didn't get that love in the beginning, and I understand why in the movie you had to have the moon causing this and all that kind of thing. I just didn't feel it, and that still doesn't really work for me. And then the second thing is just the tone, like I mentioned overall, of there is this farce. It's a farce. But there's also these moments in this movie and other plot threads, especially her dad, that feel very serious. And that jolting back and forth to me still doesn't work. Like if it was all just a full out farce, I think it could stomach it a little bit better. And I'd prefer that movie, actually. I'm not saying I want the farcical elements removed. I think that's what makes it fun and
Mm-hmm.
different. And again, now I'm into the moon, so I'm like, yeah, of course, give me the moon. The moon does this kind of thing. But yeah, it just didn't. It didn't. That part of it still rubs the wrong way. So maybe I need to see it a third time at some point in 4 more years, and then it'll work. But those are the things to me that still
Mm-hmm.
don't really work in this movie for me.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, to me, like your first point, I don't think it's supposed to be love at all at the beginning. I think it's carnal without the awareness of it, because she's just so closed up and in all senses of that word
Right.
that she didn't has not expected this to be, and to the point that I don't think she's even imagined the possibility or even the desire of it. She's taken by surprise. I think it's more of the aftermath of what happens, it's
Mm-hmm.
not conscious in that moment. And for him too, I think he's been at this rage register and self-pity register for so long that he's sort of closed up in his own way. And I think there's something just very chemical that comes into him, that, oh, now my brother has like a whole life and all this,
Mm-hmm.
vendetta and ill will that he's been carrying. That's what sparks it. And maybe he even does this out of spite
I think he
to
does.
he
Yeah.
does to
That's
ruin
his
it all.
motivation. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right.
And I don't think she even has a moment to react to it. And you could, from today's eyes, you can argue about consent or what have you. But I think to me, it works, just given where these people are. They're kind of jolted into this thing. There is no love, there is no sexual tension. It all starts after it. And it could have been just that, but it's really the opera, which again
Right.
is
Right.
very, melodramatic and about the moon, that sort of then starts to take place into it. She's not even had a makeover when all this happens the
Right.
first go around, right? So
Right.
I think it makes sense to me that the
Mm.
way that happens. And then the tone shift, I get it. Like when I first saw it maybe 5 6 years ago, even I was like, this is a bit odd. But I think it sort of works in the grand scheme of the movie. I understand what they're trying to do. Otherwise, this
Mm-hmm.
movie would be a different movie. And I prefer it this way. And there is some truth in it. Maybe not in the times we live in today, or perhaps this happens even now, but a lot of stuff that is serious and dark is covered up, and hidden in families, even though everybody knows about it.
Right.
People just shove it under because it's hard to deal with, or it might be, or for whatever reason. So I think there is some truth to that. So it doesn't bother me. And if anything, maybe it's grown on me, I think, because of that reason of the farcical nature, but also there is some truth to it, I think.
Maybe I need a third go around to like the movie more, because again, I really didn't like it when I first saw it. I thought it was actually kind of a
Mm.
bad movie, and in this rewatch, I'm like, this isn't great, but like it works a little bit more for me. So maybe I need to wait another 4 or 5 years and see it again, maybe under a full moon, and I'll
Yeah.
feel different about it. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.